2011's Dead Island by Techland was a revolutionary title for first-person games in the zombie genre. Dying Light was released in 2015 and raised the bar even more by combining the traversal and melee elements of Dead Island and improving the parkour to combat mechanics, allowing for more interesting and technical gameplay. Dead Island 2 is set to release in 2023, and Dying Light 2 came out in February of 2022, with a consensus that while it was a good game, it was bogged down with bugs. I waited until August to play with the hopes that mostly everything would be patched up, and I have to say that I had a very fun time. Well, up until the end. After the outbreak and events of the first game, the Global Relief Effort, or GRE, comes in and cleans up and is able to develop a vaccine. The group secretly performs experiments on people, and one of them escapes, starting yet another strand of a zombie virus. You play as Aiden, who is a pilgrim, which they remind you of more times than you want, which means he doesn't really settle down in one place. Someone who travels, someone who is good at fighting and taking care of themselves. Aiden is in search of Dr. Waltz, a creepy guy with too much power that did experiments on kids, including Aiden, as well as being the only person that can help Aiden find his lost sister Mia. After learning there may be someone in the large, walled city of Villador that can help, Aiden makes his way there and comes in between multiple factions that need his help with a variety of things that may or may not tie into Dr. Waltz, Mia, the GRE, and possibly the fate of the city and the world.
Okay, let's do it.
Awesome. Deal. You won't regret this, Aiden. I promise.
The story starts off pretty slow, but what lacks in the story at first, the gameplay makes up for it. The way the game tutorialized everything is smooth and eases you into all the levels of the mechanics in an understanding manner. There is so much happening in this game. It takes a while for you to actually get your bearings, and even then, there's still so many intricacies to everything. But it is all still fun to play. It may be a bit overwhelming in the beginning, but since it is a big open world that is meant to be explored, there are plenty of opportunities to learn and experiment to find a playstyle that fits you. Much like Horizon Forbidden West, you are an outsider who gets thrown in between political tensions who ends up in predicaments much larger than any faction, but this time instead of dinosaurs, they're zombies. Completing story missions progresses you through the main game, but there's many side quests to find, loot to scavenge, zombies to take down, and a large city to explore. The city is separated in districts by two oppressing factions, the Peacekeepers and the Survivors. Sooner or later, you can travel to electrical power plants. Aid in a faction by assigning these plants accordingly nets you with goodies that are specific for each side. For example, upgrading the Survivors will unlock zip lines around a part of the city, and signing with the Peacekeepers will unlock traps that will be placed on cars that you can activate and blow up a bunch of zombies. The story centers a lot between rising tensions between the Survivors and the Peacekeepers as well, so the way you choose how the story plays out between them may influence who you think should have power within the city, creating different styles of play directly on how active the player is in the story. The game looks good and runs good. There's so much detail in the environments. You usually don't see it because you are literally running from place to place, but once you slow down, it's very obvious that there was a lot of care that went into realizing this world. The characters of the world aren't very lively though. The dialogue and voice acting are very meh. Jokes are a miss mostly because of the unnatural way of pausing when talking. Characters also sometimes sway a lot while they're talking. The villain of the game is introduced with a dumb and cheesy typical villain speech, which I found pretty unthreatening and boring. It made my purpose of playing feel a little watered down. When he shows up again, he gets more interesting, but is still very hammy throughout the adventure. The game is rich in lore. It has a lot to say. There's campfires in the game that you can sit at and just listen to people talk about the world or their problems. With that said, the characters are mostly interesting, and the stories, while typical for a zombie story, are told well with some nice twists sprinkled in here and there. Getting from place to place is maybe one of the more enjoyable parts. It is fun traversing the world. I had zero hiccups in the performance of the game, which made parkouring off zombie heads and jumping off of rooftops even more enthralling. Dying Light 2 is one of those games that you don't want to start playing because there's so much to do, but once you start playing, you can't stop. There are lots of different interweaving gameplay mechanics that all tie into each other that make the game fun and rewarding. It seems like every possible combination with the buttons can be used in some way. There's a lot you can do traversal and combat-wise. Between that, the risk-reward systems, and the minute-to-minute complexity of how the game works makes it addicting. For example, there is a day and night cycle, and venturing into the night can grant you better equipment and gear. The zombies walk the streets at night, which makes buildings more empty to scavenge. Running around during the night is more dangerous though, with more zombies roaming the moon-stricken streets and alleyways. More dangerous zombies roam, as well as the zombies act more aggressive. Chases can activate where zombies don't stop chasing you until you get out of their sight or reach a safe zone, which keeps you on your toes and tests your parkour reflexes. One of the first things you get are the binoculars that help you mark places which are then placed on the map. These can very easily get overlooked, but are actually very helpful getting around quicker to places that you know you need to go or places to avoid altogether. Main loot basically comes down to your weapons and your gear. Weapons are melee focused, so you'll find a lot of different blunt and bladed one or two-handed weapons like bats and axes. Some swing slower but hit harder, while others swing faster but don't do as much damage. Weapons have durability, so you usually don't hold onto weapons for very long, which plays into the fast gameplay and running around scavenging even more. Some better weapons have slots that you can equip different mods to give them an even bigger advantage over your enemy, like poison or electric damage. Mods also increase the durability to your weapons. There are other ways to defend yourselves from the hordes of flesh eaters that you run into, like being able to craft throwing knives, mines, or finding javelins placed in different spots throughout the city. Gear is a bit different. While there are plenty of types of gear like weapons, you can't change or influence the gear. Gear has stats tied to them, like maybe a pair of gloves you find will give you a small boost in parkouring, or a chest piece that ups your defense. The more rare the gear, the more stats it can have. Equipping and using the rarest gear and weapons isn't always the brightest idea though. Depending on playstyle, a big rare hammer that deals more damage might not be the best idea if you are more of a runner that prefers fast swinging objects. Likewise, equipping a rare gear that has a lot of different boosts might not be as applicable as the common gear that boosts your fighting XP. It all kind of depends on how you want to play. Vendors in Dying Light 2 are actually really important. You find money throughout the world while looting, but selling all of your unwantables makes a difference in the long run. You also loot crafting materials that help you craft bombs, lockpicks to pick locked doors and chests, health kits, molotovs, immunity boosters, and the like. You have to find or buy the blueprint of an item before you craft it, and upgrading the blueprint at a vendor will allow you to craft more of that item or increase the durability or usefulness of the item, like the spread of a Molotov. Aiden has actually been bitten by an infected, but his reaction to the infection is far from normal. Aiden gets a biomarker during the early hours of gameplay, which is a wristband that determines how far along your infection has progressed. While running around at night, there will be a timer, and if it reaches 0, then it's game over. Well, you'll start back at a checkpoint. You don't want to restart at nighttime though, because not only can you get extra loot at night, but you also get extra XP. UV bars at safe zones halt the zombies in their tracks, or you can craft UV lights to throw around you to keep hordes at bay. There are also UV shrooms out and about you can eat, or an immunity booster you can inject to fight off infection. Aiden is in contact with a valuable tool called the GRE key that can open up GRE-related facilities and chests. With a GRE key, you can find inhibitors, which you can use to upgrade your health or stamina. Upgrading either one also raises your immunity timer, so you can run around longer at night, or withstand the spore gas, which makes it decrease even faster. Your combat XP goes up the more you fight, and you get more parkour XP the more you run around to do stunts like climbing or swinging. There are 2 separate skill trees for each one, and the abilities you can unlock are actually very useful. The jump kick, for example, is very powerful and oftentimes makes difficult fights a cakewalk. The parkour abilities like wall running and being able to jump off higher things without taking damage make running around and getting from place to place a lot faster, enjoyable, and engaging. Later on in the game, you unlock a paraglider, and that really takes things to new heights.
Nice. But you better keep practicing if you hope to beat me.
I didn't know it was a race.
Running around and fighting feels very satisfying. You have your basic attacks, light and heavy, but it gets interesting when you add your parkour skills. After leveling up, combat feels smooth and instinctive when it clicks. Being able to run, dodge, catapult yourself over enemies and kick other enemies, while running and attacking enemies after you jump off the wall, the list goes on. Then when you add grenades, mines, and the like, you get yourself a rodeo. Making contact with your weapon to a zombie's skull never gets old. There's really nothing like the squish of a hammer after a slow-mo takedown. Different combinations of different enemy types makes the gameplay fresh, and you never get the feeling of anything ever getting stale or boring. While I never had any performance issues in terms of FPS or any major graphical hiccups, I still ran into a lot of bugs while playing. Awkward ledge mantling and floating or jumping zombies are to be expected, but there's also bugs that make it so that friendly NPCs attack you for no reason, or reflections or large areas just turn completely black. Death loop bugs existed as well as many others. I was actually planning on platinuming the game, but a game-breaking glitch stopped me. Before Dying Light's 2 Big Chapter 2 update, there was an update for a double XP weekend event that bugged the end of the game. I couldn't finish it because this bug completely shut the game down during the last cutscene. So I was stuck on the very last part of the game for 2 weeks until it got patched, and by then I didn't feel like playing it anymore. Apparently there's plans to support this game with DLC and updates for a bit, but I lost all motivation to keep playing after all that. The lack of a manual save is another thing that stinks, especially for completionists. Making a wrong decision in the story, missing out on collectibles, or possibly getting a weird glitch could all be solved if we could go back to a manual save. But instead, you have to rely on the game and other avenues in order to be extra safe. The desolateness of the first game also feels a bit better. It definitely felt like you against the world. The city of Villador is large and is doing the best to survive, so of course there are a lot of people. It is a different take for sure, but the vibes of the first Dying Light game are unmatched. No matter what, it sort of always feels like you are safe in Dying Light 2. There's a blanket to fall back on. There's always something in your inventory that can help, or there's always a safe spot close by.
You see that, Aiden? You see that? It's beautiful. Oh, I can't believe it. No, I just can't believe it.
Overall, I really enjoyed my time playing Dying Light 2. The game is very fun to play. I haven't said anything about the music, but that's just because it was all pretty mediocre. The only thing that would get stuck in your head is the main theme, but that's because it blasts when you are booting up the game. The story and the portrayal of the villain feels a bit too grand with what is given. The game has genuine good side quests with good stories that are fun to watch unfold. Even though there are a lot of bugs and the lack of a manual save makes that even worse, the gameplay is actually very fun. One thing Dying Light 2 does well is having a lot of gameplay elements that combine together that make an addicting gameplay loop that not only offers reward, but a satisfying time playing the game. There is a lot here, not only story-wise, but gameplay-wise. My biggest tip would be to get immersed in the world and don't rush it. Doing so makes your experience play out a lot smoother. You have to fully commit. With all that said, Dying Light 2 is easy to recommend to anyone that wants a fulfilling game. I give Dying Light 2 a 7.5 out of 10.
Well, no, it's just that You know.
Monsters to fight, people to save.
I'll see you later.